Hi everyone, my name is Mike Hosted. We are very excited to bring you our first ATBS tax resolution webinar. Many of you in the trucking industry have a lot on your plate, so I wanted to take a moment and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. I'm also happy to have those of you joining in while listening on the road today. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out after the show at 1-866-920-2827. That's 1-866-920-ATBS. You can also gain more information on our website at www.atbsshow.com/IRS resolution or visit our Facebook page at www.facebook.com/go-to-ATBS. Our goal today is to cover a variety of topics dealing with tax resolution. We want to cover topics including how to avoid penalties, what to do when dealing with the IRS and unpaid taxes, what your resolution options are, and then we want to cover some real ATBS IRS cases. So again, my name's Mike Hosted. I have been with ATBS 4.5 years working as a business consultant as well as in tax resolution. I have also worked at Celadon Trucking as a financial analyst and have degrees in economics and business management from Purdue University. I grew up on a large farm in Indiana and have been around trucks my whole life. Joining me here today is Jessica Wood. Jessica is our resolution specialist here at ATBS. She has been working in tax resolution for over 6 years and even knows IRS agents by first name at this point. Jessica helps individuals and businesses with IRS resolution to figure out the best path to take. She has spoken at numerous events and truck shows about dealing with the IRS.
Thanks, Mike. I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. Attending this webinar is a great first step in getting your tax issues under control. For all the people who are driving and just tuned in to listen, we'll be posting the full webinar along with the slides on our Facebook page and on ATBS website at atbs.com/IRS resolution, and it should actually be up later today. This is also a great way to share this information with others. So please feel free to pass this presentation along if you know anybody else that's struggling with the IRS.
Also, I would like to add that we'll be taking questions during the webinar today. If you're on a computer, feel free to chat it to us and we'll try to answer all the questions at the end of the webinar. If you are driving and have questions, just feel free to call our tax resolution line after the presentation at 1-866-920-ATBS. We'd be happy to answer any of your questions that way as well.
So, let's just start with the very basics. First off, always file. You always want to file your tax returns even if you can't afford to pay the full amount. You also need to start to file to start the resolution process, so really it's step number 1 to get you back on track. Also, time is critical. To stop additional penalties from racking up, filing is a necessary step to stop the bleeding. The longer that you wait to file, the harder it's going to get. So just keep in mind that always paying something is better than nothing because it will eliminate some of the interest down the line. So, speaking of timing, let's talk about quarterly taxes. It's important to keep up with your quarterly tax payments and also to know the due dates so you don't get shocked at the end of the year. We have a helpful tax calendar on atbsshow.com that you can download to stay current on these important dates. In some instances, if you don't file your tax returns, the IRS can actually file for you, which is known as an SFR or substitute for return. This can happen to owner-operators, and then you end up missing out on all those helpful deductions that you should be entitled to. So really, filing on your own terms is important. If you received an IRS letter showing that you owe an extremely high balance due, this may actually be a result of an SFR. This is more or less done by the IRS to grab your attention. But the good news is, once you actually file your return, the balance due or refund will actually be readjusted. So let's talk about penalties and interest. You can be penalized for underpayment if your tax due is over $1,000. As before, any portion that you pay will help mitigate penalties and interest. And again, interest is always racking up the day after you don't pay your taxes, so it's imperative to start paying as soon as possible.
Okay, so I imagine many people may be a bit overwhelmed at this point, which is completely understandable. Can you go over why it's so helpful to hire a tax resolution specialist?
Absolutely. Tax resolution can be stressful and confusing, and that's where hiring a tax resolution specialist or a company comes in. You'll want to partner with a company familiar with your industry. You want to make sure they have years of experience, they can maximize deductions, and they have personnel available to consult and advise you on tax. Here at ATBS, we actually offer tons of services to assist you. We have over 15 years of experience. We prepare over 16,000 tax returns for owner-operators every year. We have experienced consultants who are ready to take your phone calls. We have the proven ability to lower a driver's tax liability. And we also have a 93% would you recommend us rating from people that we've helped. So, with that, let's transition and discuss my favorite top 3 resolution options. These are my most favorite common, or I should say, these are the most common sources of resolution that I actually come across when I assist my drivers. First, we have the offer and compromise, which is also known as an OIC or a settlement. Second, we have the installment agreement, which is a payment plan. And last, there's non-collectible status. So let's review the offer and compromise. This one seems to be everyone's favorite source of resolution. And this is actually where qualified taxpayers can settle their debt for less than the full amount owed. You may have heard about the offer and compromise on commercials or radio advertisements, and some people might think this is too good to be true. The offer and compromise settlement package is a great source of resolution, but you do have to qualify for this particular program. So it's very important that you understand if and why you qualify and then what the necessary requirements are. So let's review those steps. First, we'll have to review your income, expenses, and assets. You'll need to show no monthly disposable income and no or very little equity in the way of assets. After we determine if you qualify, we'll submit the offer and compromise application and all of the supportive documentation. Keep in mind the positive thing is, while the offer and compromise is pending, all collection activity is actually suspended, so no garnishments or levies can be issued to you while it's pending. And I do like to mention to my drivers that most cases can take about 4 to 6 months for the offer and compromise to be reviewed and for the IRS to come back with an answer. A common misconception is I have a lot of drivers think that they have to pay the settlement amount in full. The IRS is actually willing to work with you on payment options for the offer amount, which are also known as the lump sum and the periodic payment. We can actually help you determine which would be the best for you. Lastly, you'll need to make sure you follow through. You'll need to meet all the requests for additional information and any given deadlines to ensure that your offer and compromise is reviewed. Before you can apply for an offer and compromise, you need to have the following requirements met. First, you need to have all your tax returns filed. This way you can include every year with a balance due. Next, you'll have to make sure your quarterly estimated tax payments are paid. If the IRS is willing to forgive you on some of your tax debt, you have to make sure in moving forward that you're paying your taxes. So basically, this is how it works. The IRS negotiates on your ability to pay back the debt. Just because your friend Joe got a settlement accepted for $500 doesn't necessarily mean your offer will be the same. The offer amount is really determined and reflected off of your monthly disposable income and equity and assets. I like to mention that there is a one-time $150 application fee to have your offer and compromise reviewed. And something that's very important that I also like to mention, if your offer and compromise is accepted, you are required to file and pay your taxes on time for the next 5 years. If you default this, unfortunately, you will go back to owing the full amount. If you don't qualify for the offer in compromise, or maybe you just have a small balance due with the IRS, you should really consider an installment agreement which can qualify you to make monthly payments. If you owe less than $25,000, no financial information is needed, and you can actually request a payment plan for up to 72 months. You or your specialist can call the IRS to make this request, or you can also complete Form 9465. This is accessible on the irs.gov website. If you owe greater than $25,000, you will unfortunately have to provide all financial information, and your payment plan will be established on what your ability to pay is each month. The IRS will review your income and expense table and your asset equity table. This will be reviewed based on the information on your Form 433F. And again, this is accessible on the irs.gov. So once you establish all of your monthly payment plans, or once you establish your monthly payment, you have to make sure that you follow through and make your payments on time. If you get behind, make sure you call the IRS to let them know when you'll be sending it in. They can notate your account so you don't default on the agreement. Also, collection activity is suspended while you're making your payments on your installment agreement, so it's nice to know no garnishments and levies will be issued. Communication is key when dealing with the IRS. So, I'd like to take a moment to share one of our recent success stories. When David was referred to me by one of our business consultants here at ATBS, he was in a panic, literally in tears, while the IRS was at his house knocking on his front door. David owed the IRS about $480,000. First things first, we filed all of David's tax returns from 2000 through 2012. Next, we negotiated his full balance due based on his ability to pay. While we negotiated, we kept the IRS off his back and successfully settled David's balance due down to $11,400. We went from David owing $500,000 to just over $11,000. It's unbelievable. He paid this amount off with an interest-free monthly payment plan, and now David's on the right track. David didn't know where to start, but I'm so glad he made that first phone call, and ATBS was there to help him. So anyways, let's get back on track, and we'll go back to the third popular option for resolution, non-collectible status. This isn't my personal favorite resolution option, but in some cases it can be beneficial. Non-collectible status will suspend all garnishments, levies, and collection activity until you're financially able to request an installment agreement. Same rule applies. You have to make sure all of your tax returns are filed, and you have to also prove your income is adequate. You have to show you're not financially able to make that payment plan. The big picture is I need you to understand if you do non-collectible status, the debt does not go away. Your interest is still accruing. We always advise that you should make voluntary payments. Something else I'd like to point out is the IRS will review your income after a year to determine if you're financially capable to start paying back the debt. There's a lot of drivers that I talk to that don't fully understand this status. Some tax resolution companies incorrectly portray this as the debt is completely eliminated and the taxpayer no longer owes the taxes. But please remember, it is simply just a long collection hold. You should use this time to get you back on your feet, but still plan to resolve your tax issue because it is still there. You don't necessarily have to pay a company $3,000 to request this status on your behalf. If you're honestly struggling, with the proper information, this status should be very easily obtainable.
Okay, so at this point, Jessica, many of our listeners may be wondering what they can do today to better resolve their IRS issues.
Yeah, if you're worried that you're not an IRS expert or that you'll just make your situation worse, I'd advise for you to get in contact with a tax resolution specialist ASAP. While we'd love for you to call ATBS, be sure that any company you contact provides services that are free, you'll want confidential, fast, and have referrals made readily available for you. Here at ATBS, we do a free consultation to determine if we can actually help you. We like to put together a game plan first before we dive in, so we actually contact the IRS right off the bat to access the case details on your behalf. With something as important as your IRS issue, please make sure that you're working with a specialist that can explain each step of the way and to also keep you updated with the status of your case. Okay, so getting back to the urgency of getting your tax situation under control today, let's talk about liens. Some of you might already be aware that you have a federal tax lien, but for others, this could be in your future, and it's definitely something to be aware of. A lien can negatively impact your credit and can sometimes be damaging to your assets in future. Basically, it means that the government can seize your assets with any equity to make up for your unpaid taxes or to prevent you from buying or leasing a new truck or a house or really any big purchase. So, to resolve a federal tax lien, you can pay the debt in full, write them a check, and the liens will be removed within 60 to 90 days. If you can't pay them in full, there is the lien withdrawal program that you may qualify for. What the requirements are for the lien withdrawal program are you have to have your taxes filed, again, as always. The total balance due needs to be below $25,000. You must agree to a direct debit installment agreement. Once you have 3 consecutive monthly payments that drafted out of your account, you can then make the request to have the lien withdrawn. Levies. A lot of people tend to get confused between liens and a levy. Levies are actually when the IRS goes into your bank account or contacts your payroll directly. And remember, a lien is simply something that just affects your credit score. The levy will actually leave you with very little to your name. To resolve a levy, if you've had a garnishment or something sent to your payroll or bank, you or your representative should contact the IRS. You'll have to show that all of your tax returns are filed. You then need to show a hardship or request to set up an installment agreement. At this point, the levy release can be faxed directly to your bank and/or payroll, which will then stop future levy enforcement. So, I really don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but a lot of people paying payroll tax for their employees, like a fleet owner for instance, could benefit from learning about this, and this is called the trust fund recovery penalty. If you are entitled to withhold taxes for your employees and you don't submit them to the IRS, you can actually be personally assessed for the total amount. When dealing with employee taxes, this is a very serious matter. If the taxes withheld are not forwarded appropriately to the IRS, it could result in jail time, and we definitely don't want that. If you have an employee with taxes being withheld, you are entitled to issue them a W-2. If you have contracted owner-operators, please remember to issue them a 1099 at the end of the tax year. Okay, so that's a lot of information to take in all at once, and many of you might think that many of you might actually have different situations that we may have not addressed, but that's what our free consultation is for. Basically, if you take anything away from today's presentation, the big picture is this. You need to file ASAP. And if you don't have the ability or desire to work with the IRS, you really need to seek guidance from a reputable company who could put a plan into place. Often, and too many times, owner-operators tell me they will just ignore the IRS and they'll assume their unpaid taxes will just go away. But unfortunately, I assure you, the IRS will find you and they'll track you down. Waiting another day just isn't saving you anything in the long run.
So Jessica, is this a common issue for owner-operators?
Absolutely. This is definitely a common issue. In 2012 alone, we handled 134 cases, and this year we're on track to handle over 200 cases. Just recently, I was contacted by a driver named Tom, and Tom owed about $112,000. With ATBS's help, he actually settled for just $500. Tom and his wife were barely making ends meet when they contacted me, and they really just didn't even know where to start. But with my help and the guidance of ATBS, their case has successfully been resolved. So folks, that's really all I have today, so I'm going to shoot this back over to Mike.
Okay, thanks Jessica. That was really great information. And while you were speaking, our participants submitted some great questions. I'd like to take a little more time for you to answer a few of those questions.
Sure.
So, one of our viewers asked, is it true your IRS debt is forgiven after 10 years?
And that's a great question. Um, the IRS has 10 years to collect on the balance due. But you have to remember the 10-year clock starts when you file your tax return, not when the tax return was due. So you can always access this date, which is known as a CSED date, so it's CSED, collection statute expiration date. If you have some older tax years showing a balance due, you may want to consider accessing this date for your records.
Okay. And another one of the questions that came across said, I received a letter in the mail from the IRS. How long do I have before action is taken?
Another great question. You should actually take action immediately. So once you've been assessed a balance due, you will be allowed some time to pay it off, but if it goes ignored, your case will be transferred to collections. The collections department has a series of letters that are about 30 to 45 days apart. So once you actually receive a letter saying final notice of intent to levy, this is the big one. You have about 30 days before the IRS can take action. So be proactive and don't let it get to the final stages of levies.
Okay. And one final question we have time for here. Is there anything I can do if I owe less than $10,000?
Absolutely, always. Whether you owe $1,000 or $1 million to the IRS, you need to consider all resolution options to resolve your debt. Based on the total amount you owe, of course, some resolution options are better than others, but just remember there's always a way to get in good standing with the IRS.
All right. Well, thanks to everybody out there that submitted a question. That's it for today. A special thanks again to everyone out there for taking the time out of their busy schedule to be with us today, as well as Jessica Wood for providing us with all this useful information. Please feel free to call us at 1-866-920-2827, 1-866-920-ATBS to review your tax case. And again, you can go to the ATBS website later today to download or share our recorded webinar at www.atbsshow.com/IRS resolution. You could also like us on Facebook for helpful tax and IRS resolution content geared towards owner-operators and the transportation industry at www.facebook.com/go-to-ATBS. We hope to hear from you soon.